When we start this tutorial for our first assembly, we're going to actually start from the first part we drew, which was the hinge. One thing to do before we actually start creating the second part we need, which is the pin that will slide through, and then putting them together in an assembly, is we're going to actually start to make things look a little more realistic. One of the things we ended the last video with was telling the software that this was made of brass. However, it still has a blue, gray, cartoony type look to it. If you right click where it says Hinge Body, one of the options you have is Edit Appearance. And while you can get in there and perhaps get some sort of much more realistic look, we could at least just look at the palette here and see that we have some kind of brassy type colors. I'm going to go ahead and pick this one here, keeping in mind that it's from this gap, it's 3 columns over, second row down, and I'm just going to remember that because I'll use that on the pin as well. So now my hinge at least looks a little bit more like it's cartoony brass. I do want to rename my part studio so that it also is hinge base, like or hinge body, sorry, like some of the other pieces. And then I'm going to go ahead and add a part studio. And I'm going to rename this right now since I'm already in that habit. And this one is going to be the hinge pin. Now that I've created the hinge pin, we're going to go ahead and on the top view, on the top plane, so I know a lot of these we've started from the front plane. This time we're going to start on the top, so I'm going to highlight the top, and go to the top, and I'm going to start my sketch. I'm going to start with a circle, center on the origin, and the diameter is going to be 6 millimeters. Now, I want to just point something out right here. I am creating the part of the pin that goes through the hinge holes, which is a 6 millimeter hole. In the digital world, we can put a 6 millimeter diameter pin in a 6 millimeter hole. If we were to actually 3D print these parts, they would not fit. We are doing this because the learning that we really want right now is how to use OnShape and how to put things together. If we were designing this in a way where we were actually going to assemble these parts, this pin would be some size smaller, probably more like 5 millimeters, because our hinge, we would want it to rotate around this pin. Even just to get it into the hole, we're probably talking about at least 5.5 millimeters if we were going to hammer it into place and not have it move or have anything move. So just understand that while in the digital world, this will all work, in the real world, we couldn't put these together. You'll notice my tabs on the hinge body will fit together perfectly. Again, we would have to make the tabs slightly smaller to get that to work in reality. So for now, we'll just go ahead and keep going with this. So I have my fully defined sketch. I'm going to go ahead and close that sketch. I'm going to go back to looking at it from the isometric view. I'm going to highlight the sketch and extrude. And I am going to have it, I'm going to allow it to keep going up. That's fine. I'm going to have it be the entire 100 millimeter depth so that we get our pin shaft. I'm going to go ahead and label that as I did before. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the top surface here and click sketch. Now that time it didn't pick it up because I kind of got the edge and it's telling me to select a sketch plane. So if you accidentally click sketch and you did not have it selected correctly, you can just come back and kind of pick it afterwards. You'll notice you'll kind of get your sketch 2 is showing that way. And I'll do that before I look at the top. My next thing is to make the pin head. So I'm going to start from the center and come out. The tube on the hinge was a 5 millimeter radius or a 10 millimeter diameter. So I'm going to go ahead and make that the same so everything lines up nice. Go ahead and pick that sketch, go back to my 3D view, go ahead and extrude. This I only need a 2 millimeter head. Does not need to go up very much. And this is the pin head. Now, while I could make this work, we're going to fancy it up a little bit and make it look a little more realistic, practicing with some of our other tools. So I'm going to go ahead and select the fillet tool, and I'm very, very carefully going to select just the top edge of the head, not the whole surface, not the bottom edge, just the top edge. And I'm going to set my radius at 2 millimeters. I've already practiced this, so your number here might be different. And what that's going to do is it's going to slope this completely down. Okay? If yours is larger than 2 millimeters, it won't actually show because it wouldn't actually be able to happen because you only have a 2 millimeter thick head. So go ahead and just change that number if that doesn't work for it. Let's see, we'll go ahead and change this to the head edge. It's the best term I have for it right now. And the last thing we're going to do to make, again, the pin a little bit more realistic is we're going to go down to the bottom. We're going to turn on chamfer, set the distance 2.5 millimeters. The entity to chamfer is this edge right here. And that's just going to knock that down a little bit and make it look a little bit more accurate. So this would be the shaft edge. And this would complete our pin. So I'm real quick going to add the same things. First thing we're going to do is we're going to rename the actual part as hinge pin. We are going to assign the material. We're going to search for brass. Brass. And then to make it match our other part, we're going to edit the appearance. 3 rows over, second one down. That's why I remembered that. And we'll go ahead and accept it. And this should be my brass hinge pin. So that works just like that. Now, I know this is supposed to be an assembly video. Well, we needed that part in order to complete the assembly. So I'm now going to go over to the assembly, which I'm fine calling assembly 1. You could also change it to be hinge assembly if you want to go ahead and change that. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to insert some parts. So I'm going to click insert. And you can see it pulls the part studios that are already created within the document. So I'm going to go ahead and bring the hinge body in 2 times. You'll see why here in a few minutes. Then I'm going to grab the hinge pin and bring this in as well. Personally, especially with doing simple assemblies like this, I kind of like to bring in the parts that I'm going to start with. Okay, so if you want to, you can bring one in at a time, and that's fine, because that insert menu is always there. But I can also bring these in. You know, I can zoom out and move them around. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take this, what I'm going to call the left side hinge. I'm going to right click on it, and I am going to fix it. That basically puts this fixed in place. All of my other parts I can grab, hold, and move around, and I'll be able to rotate later on. This one is now fixed in place. If we want to consider it this, we've basically screwed it into the door frame. Okay. You can also see that there's a little part is fixed, a little icon here, so that we know that that is the one that is fixed in place. So here's the next thing we're going to do. OnShape actually, compared to some of the other types of softwares that will do assemblies, has a very limited amount of assembly fasten types that they have, because the fastening types usually do a couple of things. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to grab the pin. I'm going to move the pin out of the way. If I was putting this hinge together, the first thing I would do is I would flip this around and line it up. You'll notice since we went with a 4-tab layout, the 2 parts are the same, which if I was in a business making these, this makes it so much more sense. I just make 2 hinge bodies for every hinge I need, and they're exactly the same, and that helps me. So the first thing, the one that we're actually going to use today is what's called a revolve mate. This allows things to still rotate together. And the nice part is it's actually a pretty smart mate. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to click on it. You can see again, the number goes red, but that's okay. I'm going to click on I'm going to zoom back out here. It doesn't want to grab what I want it to grab, so let's try that again. There we go. If you notice, I'm on the circle. The blue axis is pointing straight up, and that's exactly what I want. I am going to click that. And you see a kind of a gray version stays. I'm going to zoom out, and I'm going to go to exactly the same hole on this because we're really lucky. Okay? And when I click that, you'll notice that it goes away. And right now what I have is essentially the two are overlapping. Okay? I am going to change the direction of this because what that's going to do is it's going to flip the other piece over. Okay? And I'm going to accept it. And what you'll notice now, if I get out of the mate tool, I can grab this and I can open this up. And that's exactly what I want to be able to do. But basically what's happened is you'll notice that everything's together. So they had the X, the Y, and the Z is what, when I hover over this, you can kind of read what it does. And the Z-axis is what stays in the rotating. The Z-axis was represented by the blue. And if you didn't know that, you could actually look over here on your view cube, and you see X is red, Y is green, and Z is blue. Okay, I'm going to do the exact same thing with my pin. And I can do it either with the pin head edge right here and the top edge right here, or I could do it with the bottom edge and the bottom edge of the hole. Okay, I'm actually going to do that to show you that the diameters don't actually have to be the same. So I'm going to go ahead and rotate up just a little bit. As I zoom in, I am going to start the revolve mate. I am going to do the mate connector on the bottom surface here. So you can see that that blue one is kind of sticking down. I know I'm kind of looking at it at an odd angle. It doesn't make it look like it's quite right. And I can do the same thing here. And as I put those together, it puts them together. Again, I don't need to flip them because I do want them to stay in the same orientation. So I'm going to go ahead and accept that and come up here. So I now have my hinge pin in place. I have the two pieces. If I get rid of this, I can now grab this and rotate my hinge. Now the thing is again, it is magic material, so you'll notice I can actually go through the other hinge body, which obviously I shouldn't be able to do, but that's okay. Now what do I need to do to set this up for turn-in? I do want to go ahead and click the isometric, so I want to be looking at it like this. I do want you to go ahead and leave this slightly ajar, okay? I don't want these exactly lined up. That would have actually used a different mate type. I do want you to make sure that if your mate features isn't already dropped down, so I can see that you used 2 revolute mates, that's what they call that, that I can see that. And then this is the screenshot I want you to turn in. Okay, we don't need to worry about mask properties this time. Just go ahead and turn this screenshot in because the stuff that I want to see is the fact that you put the hinge together, that it's assembled correctly, and you use the proper mates to do it. Congratulations, you've now made your first assembly.